think to understand the context of FGMC in Indonesia, we must understand the theological interpretations, the Islamic theological interpretations rather, that are used to justify Islam, Islam and FGMC. So the reason that we can be so sure that Islam stands unequivocally against FGMC is because of the Quran's categorical warnings that such mutilation of the body is inspired by the devil himself. So there's some Muslim scholars and communities who continue to support FGM, and they do so because they choose to ignore this counsel from the Quran and instead take recourse in unsubstantiated sayings falsely attributed to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, such as in an occasion in which the Prophet is supposed to have witnessed a female circumcision, and I say this very vaguely, taking place in passing and asking for it to be of a lighter type. As a result, many Muslim schools of thought today hold the position that FGMC of this lighter type is a legitimate tradition, and that as such is an acceptable but not an obligatory practice. And this was the consensus in Indonesia. It was, the severe forms of FGM, that is completely wrong, is completely prohibited, but because of this saying of the Prophet, this lighter type was allowed. There are a large number of scholars around the world argue, however, they do argue that the historical authenticity of this particular occasion or tradition is totally unsound and unsubstantiated, meaning that it cannot be rightly introduced into Islamic law and practice, and that the severity or lightness of an actual mutilation is of no consequence to its forbidden status. And I'm going to give you an example. So let's say alcohol. So alcohol is completely forbidden in the Quran. It doesn't matter if it's a light version, if you're drinking just a little bit of alcohol, if you're drinking a lot, it's forbidden because of kind of what it does to the mind and body. So one could argue that it's the same way with FGMC. There's, whether it's a light mutilation or a horrific mutilation or a severe form, it's actually forbidden because of the harm that it causes to one's body. Another argument that pro-FGM advocates use to kind of justify FGMC is to equate it with male circumcision. And again, this is kind of what we found in Indonesia as well. But here, both medical practitioners, religious scholars, they're all unanimous in saying that there can be no comparison between the two practices. Male circumcision, there's so much health data and research that's done to indicate its medical benefits, whereas it's the complete opposite for FGMC because it actually destroys an integral part of women's central nervous system. So that's kind of another argument that was used, and that's kind of counter argument that people used. So kind of what I've just described, the theological interpretations, is it seems to be clear that there's little or no formal authentic authority in Islamic law, and more specifically in the Quran, for allowing a practice like FGMC. Unfortunately, however, not all religious practices are based upon the formal or authentic precepts of their faith, and therefore pseudo-Islamic justifications of FGMC still play an important role in the continuation of the practice in some Muslim communities. And again, an example going back to what we saw in Indonesia. And this is especially so when the religious component is mixed in with cultural notions of honor, chastity, or superstitious belief. So, when looking at campaigns combating FGMC, we know that every community is different, the motivators are different, but what we found is that when religion plays a motivating factor, it tends to be the bedrock upon which all the other factors rest. Meaning that even if a campaign discredits all the other cultural, social, and economic factors that keep FGMC going, the final and most important barrier to its eradication can and may often be that religious argument. And so we've seen examples around the world where education and awareness through that religious angle have been successful in combating FGMC. And I know I've been kind of talking more generally, but going back to Indonesia, so we actually haven't implemented like a strong wide-scale program to end FGMC in Indonesia as yet. So what we've done based on the study, we've incorporated elements of education and awareness into our existing programs in Indonesia, which are all around women's empowerment and disaster relief and disaster preparedness. It is something that we do want to do. We just haven't had the funding or haven't had like the capacity to kind of roll that out. But I'm going to give you two examples of how kind of some of the work that we've done in two countries around the world to kind of end FGMC when religion has been a motivating factor. So, for example, in Mali, our Islamic relief offices, they've actually been having they have focus groups with women, girls, and men where they actually talk about kind of the religious angle and what Islam says and the harmful consequences of FGMC, and they found that to be really successful in creating this open debate and discussion, and ultimately, having people question what they're doing to their daughters. The other country I want to reference is actually here in North America, in the U.S. So one of the projects that we've done is where we've done imam training. So we've actually had, a prominent, well-respected imam have like a 2-day workshop and train these imams on Islamic theological text on issues like FGMC and domestic violence and early and forced marriages, so a number of things. But we found this to be so successful because the imams that come to the training actually look up to the imam conducting the training. And so then they would go back to their communities and advocate what they've learned. And there's been a few other really good, really great successful stories around the world where we've seen, the religious leaders, if we can, influence them or actually talk to them about the health consequences of FGMC, we actually see like a profound change in attitudes and belief.